Okay.
Anyway, I don't know if everyone hear me.
You can. That's my bad for you.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, great. I'm John Hawkins. I'm a Director of Operational Programs, and I oversee MHHS delivery for RECO and with a number of other programs. I'm going to start off and then hand over to Rob. So later you're going to, well, in a minute you're going to hear from the teams delivering qualification requirements for MHHS across the REC and the BSc. They're going to go into the detail of the process and what that means for you. And Rob's going to cover off a bit about how qualifications need to be cognizant of the delivery principles required by the programme. All I was going to say as a bit of an introduction is, so I'm not a sophisticated public speaker, so I do need notes, is that qualification isn't a new concept. It's something that's existed in the market for a long time. And neither is the concept of something like user entry process testing or the requirement to re-qualify in a programme of this size and scale where everybody is going to need to materially impact their systems and processes. It's an important concept, and it's there to make sure that in order for the market to operate, everyone needs to operate to a minimum acceptable standard of compliance to ensure interoperability in the market. A huge chunk of what's in the government's arrangements is to do with interoperability and making sure that all of the various competitive players can operate in the market together and that doesn't negatively impact each other or consumers. So qualification is focused on that, and the need for that is fairly understood in terms of these types of transformational programs. The MHHS programme is doing things differently to previous programmes. You've heard about that a bit earlier. You're going to hear about it a bit more there. There's a couple of things that's mentioned for the way that we've gone about that, in that the need to move at the pace the fastest and the introduction of qualification waves, allowing those of you that are able to implement your changes faster than others can go a bit earlier, and those that require a bit more time can go a bit later. And that means that there's needed to be some development risk. Normally, what we like as an industry is things to come in a big, neat deliverable. Everything's ready. We hand over the list of requirements. You guys figure it out and do that. In order to do that, we have to work a bit more iteratively. What that means is we get information sooner than you ordinarily would have, but you don't get the full picture until a later date. And I think it's sometimes you could look at that a bit glass half empty and say we're getting the information later. I think it's glass half full, you're actually getting the information sooner than you otherwise would have at the point it becomes available. But it is a different way of working, and we're aware of that. The final thing I wanted to say before you don't have to hear from me again and chat to me is it sounds like a bit of a boring industry term, qualification. It sounds like something that's a bit high-rolly, the government's bods will deal with it, that kind of thing. It's really, really important, not just for the industry, it's of significant importance to your businesses. And it's really, really important that you engage in the detail, engage with the teams, engage with the process at the earliest possibility. Ultimately, you need to qualify in order to continue to operate in your desired role in the market. Yeah. That is significant importance and should be really of C-suite level importance to your businesses. Regardless of the model you're operating in, DNO, supplier, agent, metering, data service, if you're not qualified by the required date, you are at risk of being able to continue to operate your business partially or fully, depending on the circumstances, until you're able to do so. So that's just something there to make sure that I'm sure everyone here is already aware of that, but it's really, really vital for you and for the programme that everyone's engaged in that and considers in that context. And that's all from me. I'll hand over to Rob. Simple.
Hi all, so I'm Rob McPherson. I'm the Elexon Helix Programme Manager. So I look after delivering new systems to support MHHS and the qualification workstream. If we can maybe just go to the previous slide, we'll break it if I'm traveling. Yeah, so we thought it'd be useful really to go back to the delivery philosophy that Smith and Warren have outlined earlier, and maybe bring it to life with some examples from qualification. I know Warren said we're at the start of the end of the programme, but I think within qualification it feels more like the start of the start. There's plenty of work for us still to do here. If you look at first principle here, the do things in a different way, I think that's even more important really in the context of qualification, where we've got extreme complexity, we've got a lot of scale, and it's really clear we need to work in a different way to deliver that. The team's made good progress so far. They're going to talk through some of the examples and plans that we've got to deliver qualification at a group, and see some of those coming through. In terms of having the right people involved, I think for qualification, the thing that really stands out are working groups that we have established. They've been very successful so far in terms of being able to define deliverables and take those through the full cycle, and also to have the right level of discussion on those topics that enables us as a group to progress with qualification. In terms of the pace of the fastest, it's clearly something that's really important throughout the MHHS programme. Within qualification, we're going to have the concept of waves. And again, the benefit for participants is it really lets you qualify when you're ready. You don't have to wait for everybody in the way to catch up, but you're able to qualify at the right time for you. I don't want to talk too much about it because the team are going to outline what the process and how that's going to work later on in the presentation. In terms of taking a risk-based approach, I think Smith has highlighted that's something that's kind of core to the MHHS programme. We've had to manage risk and take that approach throughout. Within qualification, there's a couple of things that stand out. So the process of placing reliance is one that's key there, where we're able to balance out risk with also being able to place reliance in testing done by other parties and reduce the amount of work for participants. We've also taken a risk-based approach to assess qualification requirements and how we're going to process those. The final one, if I can read the slide correctly, is about bringing it back to the real world. And I think with qualification, like all elements of the programme, we're going to have bumps along the way. We've had quite a few bumps already, and we've been able, as a group, to work through those. I think really the important part is being able to challenge ourselves to improve our process as we go through, to listen to the feedback really from this group of participants and take that on board so that we're able as a group to progress with the qualification process. As we go into the rest of the team, we're going to talk in more detail about all the areas of the approach to qualification. And I think what we'll see is that these principles really come through that presentation. So I think next step is to hand over to Andrew, who's going to take us through qualification approach. Thank you.
Oh, well, thanks very much. Forward. There you go. Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Wallace. I work for Renetco. I work on the qualification, and you may have seen me pop up on code drafting as well. So thanks to Rob and John for that introduction. I think we last spoke at the previous open day and provided an update on qualification. Things have moved on, and so today we'd like to take the opportunity to tell you the latest thinking on qualification. So I'll be picking up on the qualification approach, and my colleagues will be dropping down into additional detail. So firstly, what is MHHS qualification? So I think most of you in this room will know that if you are a REC party or a VSE party, you will need to be qualified and you'll need to maintain that qualification over time. And what that qualification does is it provides the assurance that you're able to have the right systems, processes, controls in place to meet your code requirements. And as we all know, the MHHS programme, as John said, is making some really kind of fundamental material changes to the way the market is operating. And built into the MHHS programme is that requirement to be re-qualified and to operate the new arrangements. And again, why this is so important. So firstly, this is a big set of changes, but you are parties who are already operating in the market. You are kind of operating with other organisations. That interoperability and the fact that you've got portfolios means that if this goes wrong, then there will be material impacts for consumers and other market participants. So in that context, Redco manager Alexon, with support from the programme, working very closely to put in place the MHHS qualification process that will help to assure that you as parties are ready to operate before you can start to migrate MPANs into the new MHHS arrangements. But who does it apply to? So as you can see, there are some quite big numbers here on the slide. These are the parties who operate in the electricity industry. They will all need to be qualified. So we've got 93 electricity suppliers, 36 data collectors, 44 MEMS, and 27 LDSOs. These are the kind of legal organisations that will need to qualify. Some of those may have multiple, some of those suppliers may have multiple MPIs, but you can see there is a big task ahead of us to get all the parties through qualification. And again, in terms of understanding where you need to qualify, the LDSOs and the supplier, the parties, both the REC and the BSC, so will need to be qualified under both of those codes. MEMS need to be qualified under the REC only, and data services qualified under the BSC only. So this next slide kind of puts kind of qualification in the context of the overall delivery timeline for the programme and shows how it fits in. So our first date is the 28th of February. So for this date, we're expecting there to be some SIP parties who are qualified, as well as all of the LDSOs. And that's ahead of M10. M10 is the major programme milestone, where the central showing that the central systems are ready to migrate MPANs. We all know that qualification is going to be a continual process. Not everyone's going to be ready at the right time. Even with SIP parties, there's SIP MVC, SIP non-MVC. But for SIP parties, the expectation is that those parties that are qualified by the 14th of March next year will be able to participate and start migration from M11. So the next date on our qualification journey is M14. This is the 19th of March 26. This is the date by which all electricity suppliers are required to be MHHS qualified, and that's 6 months ahead of M15, whereby all MPANs are required to be migrated. So what happens if those timescales are not met? So there is an incentive around M14. So for electricity suppliers that don't qualify by M14, then their rights to register new sites will be removed. So this will be operationalised by a message from BSC code to the REC code manager, who will send a message to CSS to update the switching operation data to remove that registration permission. So those suppliers will no longer be able to take any new sites and bring any new sites or switch. So that covers the suppliers. For the agents, for the MEMS and the data services, they are also expected to qualify by M14, and they've got a commercial incentive to do so. So if you're a MEM or a data service and you haven't qualified by M14, then you can't be appointed to any new sites. And in the context of M15, if you haven't qualified by M15, all sites will have migrated to MHHS, and in effect, you will no longer be able to operate in the market. So in addition to that kind of incentive framework, I know that Ofgem is thinking about what else needs to be and could hopefully be done to encourage the right behaviour. And certainly, in a QWG meeting earlier in the year, we were having some discussions around the potential to kind of name and shame parties who were not meeting their required testing timescales. Once we got to M14, then we're expecting the MHHS qualification, the kind of project that we're working on here to set down, and for those MHHS qualification arrangements to be folded into the enduring BAU process. So this next slide, I guess, sets out that there are three main constituency groups that need to go through qualification, and they've all got a slightly different qualification pathway. We've got our SIT parties, our non-SIT LDSOs, and non-SIT suppliers and agents. We know we've got some SIT parties, got some volunteers, suppliers, agents, LDSOs, who are working with the programme on that to support that central party end-to-end testing. That testing is being facilitated by the programme, and code bodies will then need to qualify those SIT parties, and they will be the first set of parties that go through that qualification exercise. On the LDSO side, we've got two LDSOs that are part of SIT. All the other LDSOs will need to be qualified, and they're going through role-based testing. We'll hear a bit more about that later on. That's being managed by the MHHS programme, and code bodies will then also need to qualify those non-SIT LDSOs, and we'll do that at the same time as the initial wave of SIT parties. Expectation 28th of February next year. So that leaves the non-SIT suppliers and agents, so that everyone else that's not part of SIT, and that's they also need to be qualified, and these parties will also undertake role-based testing, and we'll hear a bit more about that later on from Matt. And that's being managed by the Elexon test manager. And then we'll take those parties through qualification. That's expected to be after the initial wave of SIT parties and the LDSOs. Right, so the next slide covers the qualification approach and plan. So this is a really key document. All suppliers, agents, LDSOs, whether you're SIT or non-SIT, should familiarise yourselves with this document. This sets out the approach that you will need to go through. It sets out the qualification steps, your roles and responsibilities, sets out the plan for how this is going to work. Version 2 was published at the start of April. That covers functional and migration. As John said, we're doing things in an agile way, so there will be later iterations of this document later this year, covering non-functional and operational requirements. So a couple of bits I wanted to point out in the document to help you navigate it. I would certainly point you to Appendix C. Appendix C has kind of got the key dates for each of the waves. Also point to Annex 1. Annex 1 sets out the qualification testing arrangements if you're a non-SIT LDSO. Annex 2 sets out the qualification testing arrangements if you are a non-SIT supplier and or agent. So yeah, this is a kind of key bit of text. This is on the MHHS programme website and the collaboration base. As I mentioned on the previous slide, the qualification approach and plan sets out the steps you will need to go through for qualification. This slide, there's a lot of words on there, but it tries to kind of summarise the key steps of the qualification process. So step one is that kind of initial engagement between you and parties and the programme and the code bodies to understand what your aims are, what your proposals are around qualification. So it includes things like placing reliance. So if you want to place reliance on testing being undertaken by another party, this is kind of the upfront work we need to do to understand that with you. And also the pre-qualification submission. So if you are a non-SIT supplier and an agent, you are required to submit a pre-qualification submission by the end of this week. So hopefully it's not a surprise. I think the nod around the table is hopefully it's not a surprise. If it is a surprise, we will be there at lunchtime. So come and have a chat with us. I think we're nearly at double figures, aren't we, George, for the number of submissions, but we absolutely need to get that document from you by the end of the week. One of the key things in that document is it allows us to work with you to allocate you to one of the 4 qualification ways, so that the qualification ways for non-SIT suppliers and agents are staggered, so you can pick the one that best suits your arrangements. And then we can kind of get through the rest of the qualification arrangements. So at PIT, you'll do your internal design and testing. You will develop a document that Matt's going to talk to us a bit more about called the qualification submission. That's in 2 parts. So there'll be an initial submission where we get as much information as we can from you to allow us to then review that whilst you are undertaking the testing with that SIT or qualification testing. You'll then provide your final quad to us. We will review that. We will make sure that between us we are comfortable with it, and then it'll be signed off by a senior person within your organisation. We'll then take you through qualifications, so that's done by the rec code manager for the rec and by BSE PAB on the BSE side. And then you get into that. So you're qualified at that point, and then you get into the service activation phase. That's all the final bits that need to happen before you can then start to migrate customers. So it's things like the final bit of dip onboarding to the production environment and getting your details into OSD. Last point, you'll be delighted to know I'm not going to talk through this in any detail, probably because you can't read it. But what this does is it kind of brings together the steps that I talked about in that previous slide and puts them into the kind of the plan on the page, depending on whether you are a SIT party or SIT non-MVC, so the first 2 lines, non-SIT LDSO, or one of the qualification ways. So again, I think the pack will be circulated afterwards. All this information is in the qualification approach and plan. So this is the information that you will need to familiarise yourself with. That was it from me. I'm just going to hand over to Matt.
You want me to click or no? Hello everyone. So I'm Matt, so I work at Electron, so I'm the qualification market design advisor. And it is weird when you stand up here and everyone's looking at you. So what I'm going to talk to you first about is the qualification assessment document. So what this contains is information and evidence that suppliers, data services, LUSOs and MEMS must complete to both the BSE and or the REC and to support your qualification for MHHS. Now, the quad version 1, which includes the functional requirements, was published on the 3rd of April. And as we've all said, the further iterations will be carried out for migration, non-functional and operational, which will include evidence as well as the requirements that we set out. And now in terms of next steps, we've got the quad version 1 guidance and walkthrough, which has been planned for the 29th of May. And as always, we'll be taking all documents to QWG. So if you do go to QWG, you'll know all about this. So all suppliers, data services, MEMS, LUSOs, both SIT and non-SIT LUSOs should familiarise themselves with this document. Now, in terms of how participants deliver a quality submission, so CodeBuddy is a programme for participants to provide evidence that they've met the following requirements for MHHS. So you must have robust systems in place to meet the MHHS qualification process, that you can receive, process, send and publish data as required by the MHHS requirements. You can undertake business processes required by the MHHS requirements. And you can all successfully migrate for MHHS. You also need to ensure that you have the right resourcing, security and organisational controls in place to manage expected operation under MHHS. Now, at the moment, under the BSc, you have quite a old style way of doing it. It's currently paper-based, and we understand that through feedback that this can be quite a difficult and long process. So we've listened to feedback and we have created a quad portal. So you'll be able to have sections of the quad tailored to your chosen role. So if you're a supplier, you'll only be able to see the sections that are relevant to you. But also at the same time, if you're going through multiple roles, you'll see the multiple roles for your application. So you won't just see the 300-page document that it currently is. You can add partial or full responses. So if you start filling it in, you can then stop, go away and fill in a different section. So this will be part of your initial and final response. You can upload attachments while responding to any questions. So if you have got a question that needs evidence provided, as part of that, there will be an upload button so you can submit any evidence that is required through that. And then you can also see the review comments and status of questions when responding. So if you've sent it off to us to have a review, when you come back to that queries, look at that question, you can see that we've responded to it. We'll either respond with some more clarification, or we may respond saying, this is where we need further evidence. And then you can also see where that is. So is it with us to respond, or is it yourself to come back? So training on the core portal will be provided to all participants. So we will have a walkthrough or a webinar on this, so you can all see what it looks like and how you guys can interact with it. So in terms of, so what's next is the non-SIT supplier and agent qualification testing. So what is qualification testing? So qualification testing is designed to test all the operational systems, processes and practices which participants will utilise once live. Testing will focus on processes that pose the highest risk to settlement and retail arrangements. Unlike SIT, non-SIT supplier and agent QT will be role-based and participants will perform tests independently. Non-SIT supplier and agent QT will be managed through the qualification testing framework, or the QTF, which includes a user interface, the DIP, and test harnesses used to mimic other market roles. And the development of the QTF will be subject of the new qualification working group subgroups, which was spoken about in the last QWG. And details of the non-SIT supplier and agent QT approach can be further found in Annex 2 of the qualification approach and plan. Now, for qualification testing, participants will need to complete qualification testing preparation, which is your pre-integrated testing, so the deliverables, so that's your PIT deliverables. It will be your qualification testing readiness. You'll have your qualification test plan. And in terms of yours, so you need to actually execute your qualification testing execution, which will be your test case execution, your defect management, and your testing evidence. And then in terms of your qualification testing completion, so this will be the agreement of the worker plans with code bodies, if you get them, if you have one, the qualification testing exit report, and just so you're aware, successful completion of qualification testing is a prerequisite to finalise your participants' quad or the qualification test. Now, a bit like Andrew, so we have these are the 4 waves. So this is further into the QA. This is also detailed in the QA and piece. It's a plan on the page. And so as you can see here, obviously I won't talk you through all of it, but what it does is it sets out the timelines for your QT preparation, what your quad will dates for your initial quad, for your wave, the final quad submission, and as well as the code bodies review. And it also highlights that the quad finalised and when your MHHS qualified by. So what I'm now going to do is hand over to Nicola Farley, and she's going to talk you through the non-SIT LDSO qualification testing.
I'm here to give a brief update on non-SIT LDSO qualification testing. Yes, that good. This is the element of the qualification that the programme is managing on behalf of the code bodies, but we're very much doing that in conjunction with the code bodies to ensure that qualification testing is meeting the requirements that Andrew kind of set out earlier. And we're also working very closely with the supplier agent team to make sure that the kind of experiences that you'll have will be the same no matter kind of what qualification pathway that you are undertaking. So a lot of the material that Matt just talked you through around the different stuff also applies to non-state early stage testing as well. So I thought I'd just give you a quick update around what we got to and what's coming up for non-state early stage qualification. So in terms of what's been completed so far, we've agreed the testing framework and approach, and this has been documented. That's the Annex 1 that Andrew mentioned earlier. It's an absolutely clear read, but recommend. We've also agreed placing reliance proposals with LDSAs for functional and migration. Based on that, we've started having conversations with each individual LDSA around what that means for their individual test scope, and they're using that to support their submission of their PIT plans. So certainly we're expecting a PIT test plan from LDSAs by the end of the week as well, so fix that so it's not a shock to anyone. We also produced the functional test stories and test cases, which have been approved. They were approved at QAG last week. But that being said, there's still an awful lot to do. So in terms of things that we need to do, we need to complete submission of PIT plans and PIT assurance. We need to agree placing reliance for non-functional operational if LDSAs wish to use that policy. We need to take the test data cut and kind of finalise test data for testing. We also need to agree the test schedule for test execution. We need to get people onboarded onto the test management tool and trained, as well as dip onboarding. So that's getting people connected to the environment so that they can actually testing. And I guess most importantly, we also need to complete quite a bit of test execution and assurance of that testing. So that is kind of what that looks like as the plan on the page. This is us coming up to the start of test execution. I think the key things to point out is that we've got dip onboarding from August. So that's when the unit environment will be available, and that's what we work with LDSAs to make sure that their connection is working towards today. We've got PIT assurance happening in kind of August and September. We have multiple drops of PIT completed with LDSAs, so we've got PIT complete at the end of August for functional and migration, and PIT complete at the end of September, plus a little bit of leftover functional testing, depending on if people are kind of waiting on a drop from SIT. We've also got our test data cut happening in June, and then a lot of activity around ensuring that we've got test data agreed and aligned before test execution starts. This is how up for the test execution exit. So we've kind of got test execution and how that feeds into LDSAs submitting their pod, and that getting approved, and how that kind of meets into them supporting the wider program milestones. It is worth saying that non-state LDSA qualification testing overlaps with elements of SIT. We are working very closely with the SIT team to ensure that any independencies are kind of managed through that. And we've also got clear entry criteria to ensure that non-state LDSA teaching doesn't start when it's not appropriate for us to do so. So I think we've got the measures in place to make sure we're managing that overlap appropriately. Both program and code bodies, we've got teams behind us to support you through qualification testing. So this slide is just to give you some idea of who we are, what we're doing. There's a lot of us in the room today, so please come and say like this at the market stall, especially if you've got a question specific to yourself. We're absolutely happy to answer them. The main way that we're engaging with you is through the working groups. So the main qualification working group, which will cover things like the quad, the QAP, so the key activities that kind of Andrew and Matt discussed you through. And we're also looking at some additional subgroups which will just focus on qualification testing. So there'll be one for non-state LDSA, and there will be supplier and agents. And these will be kind of working on the kind of ins and outs of qualification testing. So how defect management and kind of all the practicalities. So we're in the process of setting them up, and they'll kind of kick off kind of end of May, beginning of June. But yeah, there are teams here to support you, and we are very much working with you to kind of get you through the qualification process. And I think that's what I would say. So I think it's time for FAQ. I think we can do some questions.
Plenty, actually.
Oh, good.
Great. Thanks, Nick. Thank you to the code bodies and thank you to Nicola as well. So we do have quite a few questions from the audience. Do you have a question?
Do the one from the audience.
Can we do the Slido? Do you want to put it on Slido?
That's really cool. You want to sit in here or over there?
To you, I can come over to you with the mic. Yep. So let's get started with the questions. So in addition to qualification and QAD, please can the programme code bodies and the IPA confirm the approach and timings being explored for DB2 consequential change assurance for participants, please? So that's me. Thank you, Smita.
So just for complete clarity, everything we've spoken about from a quad and qualification scope perspective is all around DBT1. So that is linked to what we've got within design. It's all part of the MHHS design. That's all as part of qualification. From a DBT2 perspective, I'm very conscious. I don't want to steal the IPA thunder. So I might hand it over to Richard, because there is an update due at PSG.
Hi everyone, Richard Shaw from the IPA. Yes, so we are going to give an update on consequential change assurance or DBT2 assurance at PSG next week, so we can provide a view of our recommendation of the approach around that. I think the question was about timing mainly, wasn't it, in terms of when that would happen. I think the reality with consequential changes is probably going to be different for individual participants depending on your own plans to deliver consequential change. So what we'll be looking to do is align the assurance activities to your plans. So what we'll present in PSG, which is the recommendation around this assurance, is that it will be on parties to sort of almost self-assess their progress against their consequential change delivery, and we as the IPA will do some sample-based assurance over that just to build confidence at industry level that activity is being performed. But yeah, we'll give more of an update in PSG in the webinar on Thursday and then next week as well.
Thank you.
Could we please add a comment on top of that?
Absolutely.
On?
It's on.
So I think just to add some additional flavour to that, I think there have been some discussion and potential confusion around the scope of qualification. So I think the document we would point people to is the updated PIT guidance. Hoping that will describe to parties what's within the scope of the qualification expectations, and at the back end of that document there are some new diagrams which help to kind of try and bring that to life so that parties can understand what we're expecting to see in terms of the evidence for qualification and what is outside of scope.
Thank you, Andrew. Next question, which I say is for the code bodies. Are there any limitations on the number of users an organisation can have on the QAD portal? Who is best placed? Matt, thank you.
Hello. So as far as I'm aware, no, there isn't. There shouldn't be. So if you need multiple people to upload multiple things, that is absolutely fine. I think once we've actually completed UAT, which we are currently doing at the moment, we'll be able to work out the exact number. But as far as we're aware, you should be able to have as many, well, not as many, but you should have a number of users as required.
Thank you, Matt. Next question. How are Alexon expecting to use the RTTM as part of qualification? Wants to take that? Laura, thank you.
So Laura Kennedy, the Qualification and Insurance Lead. So there's two separate RTTMs that will be expected. So one is the PIT, which we're expecting participants to use to demonstrate that the testing they've carried out has covered all of the requirements for their roles or where they're placed in reliance. We'll be providing a template for the PIT RTTM, and this should be made available in the next few weeks. I think we're going to take it to the next QWG. In terms of the qualification testing, there'll also be an RTTM for this, but this will be provided by the code bodies. It's to show that the mapping of the test scenarios and test cases that we've identified covers all of the requirements. And again, it will be used to discuss placing reliance with participants and to ensure that we have coverage of all of the testing requirements.
Sure.
Thank you, Laura.
I saw them, so I couldn't type everything on that. That's not my question.
Yeah.
But whether it's a breakout kind of conversation later, but the RTM has a requirement.
Yeah. Okay, there you go.
Sorry, the question a bit more detail to it. So the RTTM, either version of them is a mapping from requirements to the associated, is it the test scenario or the test case and the test steps? Because the template at the moment requests test evidence of the test being carried out, but test evidence is captured at a test step level. So I think there's a level of granularity that needs to be really understood within the RTTM. To make sure that you can actually show for a particular mandated requirement what tests have been carried out. So hopefully that extra bit of the question was clear, but at the moment, the current template that's available on the collaboration base isn't really usable to be able to kind of capture test evidence against.
Anything further the code bodies want to add on that?
Not on the QT side, maybe not.
So just on qualification testing, so obviously test scenarios in the qualification testing framework will be loaded. There will be test step level, and we will be expecting participants as part of their execution of the tests to be uploading the evidence at the test step level. So that will be separate to the RTTM, which is just showing that you've got the coverage across all of the tests that are being carried out.
Is it like on the RTM, is it just like a tick to say you've done all of the tests? A bit of a kind of
yes, so it's just to show that you've got the coverage, that all of the tests have been executed, and then the detail of you actually having the evidence at test step will be part of the qualification testing framework.
But the details in ADO then.
Yes.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Sorry,
Nick? Yeah, do you want to carry on? Because I know I've got to, why don't I?
I will stop.
Let's give Nick his own mic. That wasn't meant to sound quite. I know you've got quite a few questions.
The related challenge, I guess, for quite a few participants is that trying to map the requirements to the test scenarios. I know through participants I'm working with, we're all trying to do the same job of map the requirements to the kind of either the SID scenarios or to the qualification scenarios, and we're coming out with slightly different answers. So it'd be really super helpful if part of the programme or Exxon collaboratively could provide that mapping from the requirements to the scenarios.
Have to take that away. Anything further? Go on, Nick.
That mapping for QT will be part of the RTM template we're publishing, so we'll be doing that mapping for you. So that's planned.
Do you know when that's due?
We probably need to take the due away and come back with that, but we'd definitely need to take this to QWG to kind of walk people through that template. So probably update at May's QWG, which I think is the 13th.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Lee. Next question. When will PIT guidance documents be ready for migration, NFR and operational testing?
There's currently an NFR PIT guidance update. It's just kind of going through kind of final kind of programme review, and I guess will be published shortly. I don't have an exact time frame, but it's something that's been worked on. It's just kind of going through those kind of final checks before it can be published.
Thank you, Nicola. How will the waves be managed if most parties choose a certain wave? So wave 2, for example. Thank you, Matt.
So in terms of wave so at the moment, part of the PQS is to do wave allocation. And once we kind of, as we go through PIT parties' pre-qualification submission documents, we'll be able to make a note of how many people are going through each wave. We will have then, if we have got an oversubscribed wave, we will look at communicating with that party, with the participants that don't have enough, maybe they haven't provided us enough information. So we will look to make contact with parties if all of a sudden wave 2 is oversubscribed. And then what we will then look to do is potentially reallocate parties wave. So that's why we've got a first preference and a second preference. So for example, everyone picks wave 2 as their number 1 preference, then we will look to the second, their participants' second preferences.
And just to add on that wave allocation process, so I think, as I mentioned, we're looking to get the pre-qualification submissions sent to us by the end of this week. Once we've got that information, I think you'll need to bear with us. We'll need to look at that, and the expectation is we will in a couple of weeks be able to explain the expected profile of parties against the 4 qualification waves. So we'll be able to give you a rough indication of how parties have indicated their preferences across those 4 waves. But we will of course need to do that due diligence, that checking, the review of the submissions, so that we have that degree of confidence that what we're being told sounds realistic. So I think we'll have a better idea of the distribution in the middle of May, and whether there are any particular issues that need to be resolved.
Thank you for that, Andrew. We've got a few more. I'll run through them now. So will there be a published register of qualified parties across market roles? Will qualification be transparent in the same way as DCC qualified UEPT party is transparent? Process question.
So yes is the the short answer. So at the moment in the BSc and in the REC we do have qualified, well for the BSc we've got a qualified person's workbook. They will have the exact same, so we'll have an MHHS qualified workbook to make it aware of who's qualified in the new world and who isn't. That's from a BSc and
yeah, and from the REC point of view, we have a REC party register, so we're looking at how we can update that to be able to highlight which parties are qualified for MHHS qualification. Anything else you want to add?
Will also the industry standing data will contain information of who's qualified, so yeah, that's another source to check, I guess.
Thank you. Next question, how will new entrants be qualified for MHHS operations? Yeah, of course. How will new entrants be qualified for MHHS operations? Thank you, Matt.
So at the moment, we're kind of mapping that process. So last QWG, we brought forward what that initial view has looked like, and I know that if you look at the QWG papers from last month, you will be able to have a look at the new entrant process that we did deliver. Then as soon as we have a more of an adapt approach of what that actually looks like, this will be fed through the working groups and as well as our BSc PABs, BSc and REP PABs.
Thanks, Matt. Next question is, when an organisation operates in multiple roles and under multiple MPIDs, will they need to submit a separate QAD for each MPID or role, or will it be a single QAD with sections for each MPID? Exactly. Yeah.
So in terms of, so if you are a supplier with multiple MPIDs, all your processes and systems are exactly the same for all of those MPIDs, then you can just submit one quad and then you'll just list out all the MPIDs that you're qualifying in. If you do have multiple MPIDs, as long as if you've got multiple roles, that's fine. You can still submit one quad. You would just may need to detail where it differs. So if you've got, for example, a supplier role and a data service role, for your organisational sections, you just need to flag if any of those processes do differ for any of the roles. But the intention is to have it for one quad for all roles.
Thanks, Matt. Next question, will the qualification process be different for existing parties compared to those that are only entering the market for MHHS?
Yeah.
Do you want to take that, Sarah?
No, I think you've covered it.
Oh, I think I've covered it. Okay. Sorry, that's popped up again then. This one, I think this is for Jason. So what is the approach that will be taken to support any LDSOs to ensure that any SIT suppliers and other PPs can continue to migrate MPANs assigned to these LDSOs from M11, M12? Thanks, Jason.
Okay. So the assumption at the moment is that the M10 decision will be made on the basis that all LDSOs are qualified. So that is the process that has been set out to go through governance for approval of M10. If we do get to any exceptional circumstances where one LDSO is not qualified when we come into the M10 governance process, then obviously we'll have to take that into account in reporting and going through that decision making. But currently we are assuming that everyone is qualified, and it would have to be an exceptional process if we veered from that path.
That's great. Thanks, Jason. We'll take 3 more. On the QAD portal, will multiple users be able to have access to this per organisation? You've covered that one. How much will the QT RTTM differ from the PIT RTTM? Do you want to say that, please? Thank you.
So the code bodies, both BSc and REC, we've published our assessment criteria, which tells parties what we expect to be, which requirements we expect to be covered through your PIT and which we expect to be covered through SIT or QT. So the first level of difference between the two RTTMs would be that there might be more requirements we need you to demonstrate through your PIT than what we would expect to be covered through testing later through QT. The other difference would be your test scenarios that you use in PIT might differ from what we've prescribed for QT. Just as an example, some of the SIT scenarios, we've clubbed them to run one longer end-to-end test that's more common in the industry than to test it in fragments. So again, it depends on your approach, how your organization's designing your PIT scenarios. And at the end of the day, your RTTM will basically show which requirement you've covered through which test, and which test step more precisely.
Thank you, Lee. Just a few more. Can an EES API be made available for PIT testing? Who's best placed to? So this one is for you, John. Can an EES API be made available for PIT testing?
Yes.
It's nice and easy.
Yeah, I assume you can hear me. We're finalising the exact date of when that'll be available. At the moment, we're assuming it'll be available for testing for the UIT environment. So we're just finalising exactly what that means in terms of test data, usage, dates, availability, etc. And we'll be communicating it when we do. But the assumption is it will be available in line with the UIT environment for those who wish to test it.
Okay, great. Thank you. As we're good on time, we can take a few more questions, if that's okay. So will a party definitely be in either their first or second preference wave? If not, is there any right of appeal if a party does not receive their first or second choice? Matt?
I think the idea is that we would keep to your preferences. I think at the moment the aim is, that's why we have asked for your first or second. I think if there was any oversubscribed even in your second preferences, I think we would make sure that if we were to use your second preference, we'd almost make that as a first to make sure that your second preference is taking priority. So there shouldn't be the idea that if you've put 1 and 2 that you're forced into 3, or if you've done 4 and 3 and you're forced into 2. So we would always communicate with you. We'd ensure that your first or at least your second preference is used.
Just to add to that, you also mentioned appeal. So firstly, we'll work with parties. Wherever we can't accommodate both their preferences, we'll work with you to understand how best we can accommodate you. Specifically around the appeals process, both courts have processes where parties can bring appeals that can then be taken to our respective performance assurance boards. Those processes will still hold true. So where a party is not happy, they will still be able to access those processes.
Thanks, Vee, and thank you, Matt. Next question, how will customer-owned agents' qualification alignment be managed? So for example, how do we know if a customer-owned agents are qualified to enable migrations?
I mean, we spoke about where the qualified parties list will be published, so for suppliers to check up agent appointment. I mean, obviously, when you're appointing parties, you need to ensure that they're on the qualified parties list, ISD, etc. In terms of so agents, Andrew spoke about incentives available for suppliers and various sanctions that the code bodies are considering. For agents, it is like if you don't qualify, you don't have a market to operate in. So that is quite clear where the incentives for them is. Where a customer's appointed agents have not completed the qualification under market-wide half-hourly and are not intending to go forward, at that point, suppliers and customers probably need to engage in that conversation around finding appropriate agents to service the sites.
I think on a related topic, we have over the last couple of weeks had some questions from parties who are interested in whether we will publish information on the allocation of people to particular qualification waves. I think Vee said you'll find out when someone's qualified, but I think people are interested to understand whether we'll be telling people who's in which wave. So I think at the moment we're not intending to provide that information to parties. That will be for organisations to discuss with each other, in particular where you've got those kind of commercial relationships between yourselves.
Thanks for that, Andrew.
Sorry, can I just ask a question?
Yeah,
Chris.
Let's take the mic, Chris.
The question was specific to customer and agents because we don't have contractual arrangements with them. So they have contractual arrangement with the customer. And that's why it's important, because some of those contracts are long-term contracts and we would need to know early if that customer couldn't be migrated to that customer and agent, or if that customer and agent wasn't planning to be part of market-wide half-hourly. That's why it's specifically pointed at that. And I think the non-publication of wave allocations, or at least people who aren't going to be market-wide qualified, is important, because we need to start those conversations early, because they'll need to find another agent, or we'll need to find another agent for them.
I think we'll take it away.
Yeah.
Do you want to, Andrew, do you want to come back in?
This is a non-answer, but I think as ever, I think it's really helpful to get the next level of detail down. So we'll take that one away and give it some further consideration.
Great, thank you. We've just got a couple more as we're doing good for time. I'll carry on if that's okay with the code bodies. This has been really helpful. Thank you to everyone who's submitted questions, and thank you for answering them. So, how will customers be protected from shorter settlement timescales, as consumption data errors will not be corrected as far back as is currently the case? So errors of this nature can amount to tens of thousands per month and can go back several years.
George's answer earlier.
Yeah, George, would you like to take that? Yeah. Go.
Thank you very much. So yeah, this is again related to disputes. And once the disputes process is finalised, we're going to be hosting workshops like today, having consultations with parties, and then delivering guidance. So it'll be answered then. But yeah, so it's not for today, but yeah, and we'll answer that in due course.
Next one, what is the minimum level of process documentation detail required to be included within the QAD? Are you able to answer that?
This will probably be a non-answer as well, but we, like Matt mentioned, that we're hosting a qualification assessment document walkthrough webinar on the 29th of May. Invites haven't been gone out yet, so please don't worry if you don't know about this just yet. During that session, we'll be delivering, there'll be guidance which will help the party navigate what exactly the code body expectation for each question is. We'll also be doing some walkthrough examples as we did for the pre-qualification submission earlier. Just a bit more on that, the guidance, you'll have view of the guidance ahead of that walkthrough. So we're intending to take that to May QWG. So paper days, I think 7th, you should have visibility of it then. If you think the guidance is not clear or you want more detail, please feedback so that we can refine it ahead of that walkthrough. So,
great, thanks, Bea. Is there an SLA from Programme for QAD portal responses? And will it be well resourced?
it's
I think we had a related question earlier, but do you want to?
So within Appendix C of the qualification approach and plan, we have mentioned the review turnaround times. So for every party to submit their initial QAD and their final QAD, there's a window. And from that window, we've said within 4 weeks or 6 weeks or this date is when they'll hear back from the code bodies. So we've got that rough SLA of about 4 to 6 weeks over there for reviews.
Great. Thanks, Bea, for answering that. When will all qualification test scenarios be identified covering functional, non-functional, migration and operational? Laura, is that for you?
So as we've said previously, the qualification testing is based largely off the SIT test scenarios. So we have the functional scenarios out at the moment. We're doing a piece of analysis with the programme team to ensure that we have full coverage there. So the functional ones are very close to being finalised. We then obviously do have a dependency on the SIT scenarios for the non-functional, operational and migration all being signed off and completed before we can reuse them for QT, but we'll be bringing a plan with more detailed dates to QWG.
Last question. There is real value in LDSOs getting viability on what supplier. Visibility. Yeah, sorry, that was it. Visibility on what supplier is on what qualification wave. Can the programme please reconsider their initial intent not to publish? That's to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Kind of refer back to my previous answer. I think it's always useful to get the next level down in terms of the information. So I think it'd be worth having a discussion to understand more as to why LDSOs would need to understand who's qualified and who hasn't qualified, other than the normal kind of expectations around the updates through the ISD route. So that feels like one where it's useful to get a bit more information from the party, probably an LDSO, who raised the question.
And I know that's come from an IDNO, so thank you, Anne Claire. I think I know where the direction of this is going is probably around thresholds and migration. And so you'll hear a bit more from Warren around where we are with migration, but the intent is to take that information that we have from code bodies on wave allocation and feed that into migration profiling. So even if it's not published in the public domain as per Andrew's earlier, we will still be taking that into account in our migration planning. And then obviously that will then feed into the thresholds that sit on a LDSO by LDSO basis. So even if it's not published, it will still be taken into account in our migration planning, and Claire, and you'll feed, that'll be fed through with our discussions with you for migration on your thresholds. Yeah.
Do you mind just taking the mic? We did it.
Jenny Rawlinson, BUK. So I raised a question with regards to us having sight of suppliers' schedules on the migration framework consultation, and I've had a response back to say that we will have sight of them. So maybe it's moved on a little bit. And the main reason for that is because we have to manage those, and there may be some offline manual activity that we need to undertake, which we wouldn't be able to undertake if we had huge volumes all at once.
That's exactly what I was expecting, so I'm glad I'm consistent with Warren's response on that there. That's good.
Thanks, Jason. I've had a few more come through. What specific lessons learned from the MHHS qualification open day have been applied to the qualification approach? Are you clear on the question? Because we've got Angelos in the room.
I can try and answer it.
Okay.
So not just qualification or MHHS open day, but just generally through party interaction, through the qualification working groups, advisory groups, and various of the forums that we have on the program. It helps us see whether we're tackling the right things in the approach. Just as an example, today we've had questions been asked around visibility of which agents are qualified, which suppliers are qualified to help with parties planning for migration. Again, that's something that's now on our radar. We'll go back, think about it, bring something to the qualification working group, work it out, and the solution will then go into the qualification approach. So this is exactly how we, design our approach. We talk to parties through these various different forums, and we take that on board and write it up into the approach document.
Thanks for that, V. When will the QAD portal?
Specific question from Angelos, if I'm correct. We had a session last summer where we took a lot of feedback that we met that was specific to that, wasn't it, Angelos? You wanted to understand what we've incorporated and what we haven't. Do we have a response, or do we want to take that away and come back?
About
It's that one in the summer.
Exactly that.
Yeah. What's happening? Thanks, Matt.
If you're referring to the one where we went to the KPMG building. Yeah, right. Okay. So as part of that, as part of the forum that we had of the day, we took away the idea of the idea of the quad portal, because at the moment it is a paper based, and that's what I spoke about. So we have developed a quad portal. We have understood where the in terms of qualification testing and making sure that we're not forcing people to kind of do things that they don't need to do now. So the idea of, if you're an existing party, that actually, do you need to do everything, or do you just look at what's changed? So in terms of that, there is an outcome report that I unfortunately don't know off the top of my head, but that's just a few of the bits. But I know that a lot of that day we did take away heavily, and we did all discuss. So it has fed back into the approach in terms of we had the tranches view, and we felt that the tranches were very rigid, so that's why we changed to the wave to make it kind of more open and flowy than like it should be.
Thanks for that, Matt. When will the QAD portal be made available? Back to you.
So at the moment, it's the plan is to do it for the summer. It'll be ready and available for the summer, but it's going to be 100% ready for September, because that is when SIP need it. So the idea is that it's going to be ready for parties for the summer.
Next question. The visibility of LDSO qualification publication materially affects the supplier's ability to come up with a credible migration plan. So I am not clear on the response. Doesn't this bake more complexity in if this is managed from the centre programme? Do you want to take that? Thanks.
Mike, I can drive it down. So the assumption is still that all LDSOs will be qualified in time for M10, and therefore that all license areas will be available for migration of MPANs from M11 onwards. So that is
we can materially plan our migration
on the basis that you'll have all MPANs available to you from M11 onwards. And unless there is an absolutely exceptional circumstance, as we said, through M10 decision making, but that will become very visible through the programme.
Thank you.
The mic back. Thank you. And I think this is the final question, unless another one pops up while I'm speaking. It has been raised before in working groups that there is a risk, there is a gap in terms of test cases between QT and SIT. When will information be shared on this in terms of any changes to SIT scope? Jason.
Thanks, Sophie. Yeah, as you've said in there, this has been raised in a number of working groups. It's one of our key programme assumptions that there is no additional testing for SIT participants in order to demonstrate qualification requirements. So that's why I think V mentioned it earlier. What we're doing is we are taking the analysis of the business requirements that the code bodies have done against their assessment criteria. We are mapping that into the current scope of the SIT test cases to have a look at what that coverage analysis gives us. And I think we sent that out as part of the batch 2 test scenarios that we were going to undertake that process. When we complete that process, we'll see whether there are gaps, and then we will have to look at the appropriate mechanism to take that forward. Now, it might be that that is through demonstration of evidence in PIT, because obviously we've asked you all to test and provide evidence for your PIT coverage. But yeah, we'll have to complete that exercise, look at the outcome of the coverage, and then we will speak to the SIT participants as to what the implications are from there. But I wouldn't like to prejudge that at the moment, but that's the process we're going through at the moment.
Thank you. And there was a final question, which is actually for the PPC. It was just about when the slides will be shared. So we'll aim to send the slides to all participants by tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you very much to the code bodies, to Nicola Farley, and to the audience for all your questions. We'll move on.